Welcome to Kitchen Chat. This is where we sample the talents of the most notorious chefs, home cooks, foodies, and celebrities that sizzle. Get ready for a culinary journey that you won't find anywhere else. Here's the host of Kitchen Chat, Margaret McSweeney.
Hello, dear foodie friends, and welcome to Kitchen Chat. This is your host, Margaret McSweeney, and I am so excited to be here at a very special place in Palm Beach, Florida, with a very dear new friend, Nancy Brinker. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Well, foodie friends, I'm sure you've heard of Nancy, but if not, I just want to share a little bit about her. We met just in New York at Wendy Diamond's Women's Entrepreneurship Day celebration. You're being honored, and you, of course, are a wonderful businesswoman. Philanthropist, founder of Susan G. Komen and the Promise Fund, a former ambassador to Hungary. In addition, you received, is it the President's Medal of Freedom? So accomplished. But what I love most is, I asked before, do I call you Madam Ambassador or what do I say? And it was just Nancy. So thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. No, I'm just honored to be able to have this time with you today. Thank you for coming by.
Oh, thank you. And as we all know, charity begins in the kitchen, and we're at your kitchen table. And I'd love to hear the very special story about the charity that you created and founded at your kitchen table.
Actually, there are two charities I started at my kitchen table. One was Susan G. Komen, so named after my sister at her request, as she was dealing with incurable breast cancer. And then when 40 years later, after she died, and I had developed breast cancer in the midst of all that, and we were able at Susan Komen to fund a tremendous amount of research. So many, many more people are living today with the education and all that happened and the wonderful affiliates all over the country. But when I got back to Florida, which I chose to be the place I wanted to live after that, and I really came upon some very disturbing facts, and that is that we are one of the most unfortunate counties in the country. We have almost 90 to 100,000 women with no health care, and that all developed over a period of years. That didn't just happen yesterday, but Florida being mostly an agricultural state. And then when all the business development started, there really wasn't a lot of business in the part of the state I live in West Palm Beach, which is the third largest county. And so as a result, many immigrants were living here, and also people who had retired or had just moved here to have better weather. But these numbers were unacceptable to me. I'd been spending my whole life in getting health care for people, and particularly for cancer and breast cancer, for years and years. But really, what bothered me is that we don't have even a county hospital in our county. We have for-profit hospitals. We have what they call a healthcare district, which was created when a couple of the hospitals folded because they couldn't afford to run here, because West Palm Beach really wasn't a business community for, as you know, for many, many years. So there was a lot to face there, and because I'd spent most of my life in the fight against breast cancer, so did the women here who were developing it at a very fast clip. And it got to the point where you couldn't just direct a woman to a family physician. We didn't have all the services we needed here, and most of the hospitals here are for-profit hospitals. They're not for-profit centers where people can go. And I got really upset about it. I heard it, and then I validated it with a couple of very close friends. And we did our research and found out the numbers don't lie. That's really what was going on. And I said, well, I don't see how any of us can live in a county like this where we know we're not doing something to change that for women and their families. Well, one day, a friend guided me to the Federally Qualified Healthcare Center program, which most Americans, a lot of people don't know about it. But their center is largely funded by the government, is the biggest sort of client of theirs. Everybody has to pay something if they go in to a federally qualified healthcare center, and most of them are named. The center here that is the largest is called Found Care, which is really a great name for people who find care here. And they are primary physicians generally, but in many different areas. And though they don't do surgery and they don't treat diseases that are chronic, etc., they find people who can help people of very low means.
Yes.
So we looked at this, and it ran through my mind for a couple of months. And then one day, I thought about, after touring the center, how incredible it would be if we could somehow install a women's center there by getting a mammography equipment installed, along with cervical cancer capacity after we got the mammography and women's center started. So in 2018, we started fundraising and getting it going under the name of the Promise Fund of Florida. And people were generous and great, and I went to a wonderful company called Hologic, who make this kind of instrumentation and this kind of equipment.
Yes.
And they happily donated to us a 3D mammography machine. And then we provided the ultrasound capacity, and we were in business, so to speak, even though it's a not-for-profit, of course.
Yeah.
And our goal was to bring in so many of these women for the first time to a clinic like this, where they would feel comfortable, they would feel at home, they would not be rejected for any reason at all. If they had $5 in their pocket, they could use that. If they had a Medicaid policy that was weak, they would take that. If it was Medicare, whatever it was, they had to put something down, even if it was $1. And if they had nothing, they would be treated. And to that point, the federally qualified healthcare centers are, there are 1,400 of them now across the country. Wow. Now, mind you, they'd been supported by most of the presidents we know in our modern view of history. President Bush was a huge supporter of them, and all the presidents before, going back to President Reagan. So it was a real joy to find these centers. And they ended up now treating or seeing about 70% of the poverty-stricken people in our country. And then some of these centers are rural, some are in bigger cities, but they're a godsend because there is no other way. And our healthcare system is complicated enough for those of us who can afford to be in it. But to be poor, to have all kinds of situations happening, the last thing you get to think about is your healthcare. And I said, you know, so much of healthcare today, where it's going, is preventive or detection, early detection. Those two things, prevention and early detection, are going to be the next best drugs in our country. Indeed. And so it was with breast cancer. As much as we can determine now through blood studies or palpable lesions a woman might have, at the end of the day, the best way to detect an early cancer is by screening. And primary care, that is some breast exam or seeing a primary physician once a year. So that's what we did. We created this system, and we call it the Promise Fund Breast Center. And since that time, of these 90,000 women who've been left out of the healthcare system, we have navigated, educated, screened, kept many of them healthy by making sure they were sent somewhere if they had a more advanced problem. 26,000 of those patients. And now we intend to double that next year and double it the year after until we get through this population, and it's time for them to come back again. Also, what we've done is introduce them to this center where they have real primary care. And so they're familiar with it, they're not afraid of it. And to do that, we have hired 19 very qualified patient navigators.
Great.
And patient navigators are between being a nurse and a social worker. They have those qualities, community navigators. And their job is to bring people from their part of our county into the center and stay with them, make a relationship with them, so that they have any other healthcare needs. They can be the guide. Navigation is just what it sounds like, guidance. And now it turns into friendship. And it's such a joy for all of us in the Promise Fund to see these people treated and treated well, not just treated for their disease, but to be welcomed into a healthcare system.
There are just so many things I want to say. I mean, first of all, thank you as a fellow breast cancer survivor, 11 years now. I'm so grateful. It is so scary to get that unexpected diagnosis and to navigate, as you were saying. And I have to say, what found my breast cancer was the 3D mammogram. And I am forever grateful that that was available. It was just coming out at that time. And so thank you for your work with hologic, with all of that. And I think it's so important. I mean, maybe there's someone out there, you've just received the diagnosis. Please stay encouraged and hopeful, because there's so many options out there for you. And Nancy is paving the way, and she has been paving the way and saving lives.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you. And I was helped along the first year, really, before we launched our clinic to the public. We'd invited Jill Biden to come down and see us, and she and her husband, the president, are very, very involved in cancer care. Of course, the Moonshot is their big effort, and they've just been terrific to work with on that, on this kind of situation. And so she came down and was very taken with the fact that we'd had these wonderful navigators and that we were beginning to really bring people. The other issue is that we were able to determine what the social determinants were that were keeping these women, particularly who weren't coming to Found Care or various other small clinics. And really, it's always the same. It's transportation. They didn't have transportation. Or situations at home, or their home was like a food desert. They didn't have enough food. I mean, all these things come, and you just, every day I would have tears in my eyes, and I'd say, this just can't be how people have to live every day in our country.
Right.
And I can't tell you what a joy it has been to meet the patients. We have an incredible staff beyond that. We have some of the most wonderful managers of the care that we're giving. We have a great chief operating officer, Karen Patty, who has helped us organize the organization so well, so that we now have requests by other people who want to do the same thing to replicate what we're doing. And to that end, our 3 congressional members, 3 women, Lois Frankel, Sonia McCormick, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz from Broward County, all put in for the infrastructure grants to the community for 3 new centers. So altogether, they've donated $3 million to us to replicate 3 more centers like this, co-located in the federally qualified healthcare center nearest to where they are. And so you can see why I wake up every morning smiling. I'm not kidding. A moment doesn't go by that I'm not smiling. I know there are going to be issues ahead. We know there's going to be problems that we didn't foresee, but this is such a welcome service to people who I was amazed at how many women had never had any primary care and had only seen a doctor when their last child was born. And this can be caustic, and terrible for a woman. In our part of the county, we have a large black population, and they die 4 times faster of breast cancer than Caucasian women.
Wow.
Hispanic women have very and some growth of some of the worst problems in cervical and those kinds of cancers are growing in their population. So the combination of two really is a major problem for us, to not have the health care connected to it.
So important.
And we have been very, 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 how shall I say, forceful in getting the support from our healthcare district and private funding.
That's wonderful. Speaking of private funding, what can our foodie friends out there do to help you and help save women in this fight against breast cancer?
Well, I think every woman, think about women. If you're lucky enough to have an insurance policy and you get to see a doctor, think about, sending a donation, thepromisefundoflorida.org, and we will make sure that any resources we are in charge of handling are used to the highest, are made to be used for the highest and best use, to educate people, to bring them into treatment, or at least screening, to bring their children with them, because the federally qualified health care centers also treat children, dentistry and some of the things that are the most expensive, and then husbands come often to follow the woman patient. We can fix this. These are things that we can fix in our country, and that is our goal, to do that. We're finding that so much change in healthcare is happening in communities. All the talk and arguing in our political world with how bad things are in America, I can't imagine a time when things weren't great in America. That's because I was lucky to have grown up the way I did. But also because my mother was a fierce volunteer, and she managed to get things done with people that I could never believe. She built a Girl Scout camp in the middle of our town, Peoria, Illinois. It was a little, but I mean, she did things like that. She took on things that were very hard with my father's full support. But we're having almost a blessed experience. I can't explain it to you. When you see a woman who was so frightened, and now she has someone to take her by the hand, organize her appointments, and you know that so well. Those of us who have insurance and know that path, when I had breast cancer 4 years after my sister, Susan Komen, died, it was that all over again, and I was afraid I was going to die of it. Now, when she died, we created Susan G. Komen Foundation, and many people know of the work of that organization now. We funded over $1.5 billion in science and over $2 billion in community care and advocacy, etc. But I knew when it was time to do what we're doing now, because it isn't just about the research, which we all need, but it's more than that. We need to apply what we know. And sometimes in America, we get ahead of ourselves. We start on something new before we've applied what we already know and isn't being received by people. And that's what we're finding more and more. So we're encouraging people to come to thepromisefund.org, and it is on the website. All of our numbers are there. You can write to us. You can call us. And we're looking at things, not just the social determinants, but the real moves forward in screening, so that with a wonderful partner like Hologic, who will be adding AI to their capacity, we are just over the moon, because we want to learn so much more about what the patient has, and that's what we believe the dream of AI will do. Most people are committed to the idea and understand it. Most scientists and people who are practical, medical, people who provision things for patients. And honestly, I think this is going to take us a decade or 2 decades or a century ahead of what we now know.
That is amazing.
And it'll be detailed to the patient, which I'm so excited about. Maybe it won't be able to do everything we think it should do, but it will add a great deal, a body of information.
Just that collection.
And, and when you take, you just, again, look at a woman who's under the poverty line and living in a county like this where she may or may not get care. And we have some primary care providers, but not nearly enough. The population has grown dramatically.
Right.
We have over 1.5 million women, 1.5 million people living here now.
Wow.
With no teaching hospital and no ability right here in our county. We have a medical school, FAU, that's near, but not enough to provide what most big cities or towns have to be able to treat people.
Wow.
So we're really looking forward to making progress on each of these fronts and working with our community. And every year now we have had a summit meeting of all the nonprofits who deal with a lot of the things that we do, the social determinants, the need, the food bank, the on and on. And we all come together at a meeting and we talk about the progress we've made and we help each other. If somebody has a need, we know who to call. But the greatest thing has been, one of the greatest things, Uber, the company who has donated several rides for our patients to get to the center.
Thank you, Uber.
Thank you, Uber. And thank you to so many of our supporters and backers and our congressional members, everybody. Most movements today are created in communities.
Yes.
And I knew and know we have to create a movement out of this. We have to get people to understand they can do this in their counties, in their districts, in their towns. If they're just innovative, it's like putting a recipe together. Where is this? Where is this? Where is this? And I find that Americans still are the most generous people in the world.
Indeed.
And I'm always amazed at the things people have given us, the things they've pledged to us, and the way they've reacted, which has been so welcoming. So we just keep building. We keep doing things that create better access that people have to care, making it easier to get to us, continuing to reaffirm the patient-navigator relationship, teaching other people how to do it, and talking about it all the time, and bringing more people into our organization.
And gathering around the kitchen table and having these conversations just like you do at home. And you can feel empowered to find a need and act upon it.
Yes.
And just like you have. I'm curious, food. Have you seen food? Have studies shown food kind of has a role in healing, helping people heal through breast cancer? What have you run across in terms of that?
I haven't studied as much as I would like to study about it, but I'm firmly becoming much more a vegan kind of eater. I mean, I still eat meat in very small portions. I wean myself off of it over time. Not because, and listen, my deceased husband had a very, very successful business in the days when we all ate beef all the time, and all of them. I mean, it was what the diet of America was.
Absolutely.
So there was nothing wrong with that.
Not at all.
And still is nothing wrong with it once in a while, and but I've enjoyed learning how to cook vegetables, where to get them, in what state do you eat them in, and how do you, and recipes that friends give and pass around. Because it is a new way for us all. But I absolutely believe it's healthier. I sleep better.
Yes.
I have more energy than I've always been, thank heavens, blessed with it. But I just feel better.
Yes.
And I think that a lot of people will feel that. Some of the problem we come into, and this is another social determinant, is food supply.
Yes.
So if you are, underpaid, not paid, if you are on, if you don't have a food bank in your town or that's accessible, it's really hard to get good food and hard to afford. And that's something we're working on. So that's why we work closely with the food banks, so that if any person has a problem who now is being treated, we make sure they learn to eat properly.
Absolutely.
And then, the same with childcare. So they have children and husbands and family issues and all those things all surround every patient, no matter what you have, and it's all the same. It's just in degrees.
Absolutely, and perhaps down the road, community gardens
Yes.
can play a role.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Community gardens would be fabulous.
Absolutely.
What we found is that in Palm Beach County, I'm not quite sure whether it was the healthcare district or many of the small nonprofits and the big nonprofits who were giving boxes of vegetables to all the patients and people that they knew needed assistance. The problem came in, however, that they didn't know how to prepare them. They didn't know how to cook them. Or they had only one way, and it was to fry them or in a way that wasn't really healthy. So we've had a big focus when it comes to people going to the any of the food providers. They cook very healthy foods out of our food bank. So it's coming to, you know, the head. It's coming to where most people want to know more, and they're also far less expensive in most cases than buying meat.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean down with meat. It means that
not at all.
you've got to temper yourself with it and know what you can use it almost like a condiment rather than a whole big chart, you know.
Absolutely.
And it does make you feel better.
Absolutely. Well, I would like to show a special recognition to your late husband, Norman Brinker, who is the founder of Brinker International, which the companies which bring such deliciousness to this world, with chilies and Maggiano, and so many others, and such a great philanthropic company as well. So and he was known as the godfather of restaurants.
Right,
I understand.
And yes, exactly. Yes, he did. He transformed the restaurant industry into casual dining. Those were his concepts, steak and ale. He was one of the first persons to hire college students.
Wow.
And it made so much more sense. They needed to earn money, and he needed to spend less money. So it was a perfect combination. And he was such an incredibly nice and hardworking human being. He came from a very poor background and built himself up with his family, and he was an extraordinary individual and died some years ago due to an injury. And that was very sad. But his lingering effect is still there. I see people who still mention him in talks in the Restaurant Association's meetings, and the principles that he talked about often were more about running a successful business than necessarily promoting the food when he was in a corporate environment. And he taught people so much about how to inspire people and how to get them to become involved in things. And but it was a great honor to be with him for so many years, and I know I learned a lot there.
Oh, that's great, and his legacy continues. Well, I would love to hear about your experience being ambassador of Hungary. What was it like? And I would love to hear about your favorite meal.
Okay. The year was 2000. President George W. Bush was finally elected, and his team asked me if I would consider being an ambassador. Now, why was that? I guess because I worked hard in his campaign. I'd also worked hard in his father's campaign, and I'd worked in every one of those campaigns since Dwight Eisenhower, who was my great idol in life. He was an idol to me because he was so active in the Holocaust after the war and documented that, which today, thank God he did, because we have Holocaust deniers. We have, you know, and he did so many of our great presidents. And I was a great friend of Ronald Reagan's and all of them, and became very friendly with Betty Ford because Betty helped me through my breast cancer when I had it 4 years after my sister died, and had started Susan Komen. So it was she was just a wonderful human being, and we're still very close through her daughter, Susan, who's just amazing, and all of her relatives and children. But I was just very lucky to be asked to be an ambassador, and they bring you in and say, now what would you like, where would you like to be posted. And I said, well, I don't want to be farther than 8 or 9 hours away from my family, because I knew my father wasn't feeling like himself. I knew something was going on, but I didn't know what. And I knew that if I needed to come home, I didn't want to have to travel 2 to 4 days to get there, because it might be really serious. So we looked at all the countries on a map, and the big countries had been spoken for. But then there were a whole lot of other countries. And I said, I'd like to be actually in Central Europe, because in Central Europe, the problems had been so great about the Holocaust. I am Jewish. And I said to myself, maybe besides engaging women in health care and the things I knew I could do, because women's diseases were killing them very quickly in Central Europe, and they didn't have the opportunities we have. But more than that, I wanted to help people have hope again and know that they were equal citizens, that they were accepted now, despite their religion. And I wanted women to feel good about what the years now ahead hopefully would bring. And that's why I'm so destroyed about what's just happened. October 7th was so devastating and such a step backwards. But at least in the early 2000s, people were anxious to build democracies in Central Europe and in countries where they knew we had their gratitude for the things we'd done, but we wanted to make sure they also had freedom in their country and some of that's reversed since then, which is disappointing to me. Dictators have come back, and that's the way they've chosen to run their countries, and there's very little you can do except accept who they are and hope that they really will continue to be allied and be good members of NATO and do things that give people freedom and ability to do what they can in their lifetime. So I enjoyed Hungary very much. It was very lonely at first, and of course I couldn't speak Hungarian, but the embassy made sure that I had a translator so I could. And then I got very interested in their culture, because I knew there wasn't going to be very much I was going to be able to do really about growing dictatorship or growing anything other than the kind of government we have. I don't know any other way to help. Other than getting countries to continue to speak to each other and share their wisdoms and whatever. But I always loved the music of the great musicians of Hungary, and I loved, and then I discovered I really loved their art. Not really known well in the European art market, so some of the artists are well known, and so I began a collection there of all the art in my home is from Hungarian painters. From about 1867 is one of the earliest one. Mihály Munkácsy, a famous parlor painter and adored, is the one behind you. But all of them come from different eras and tell the story of, in a way, a small country that had been through many changes of government and leadership and power, and always reflected in their art. Always, every country, it's reflected in the art, whether how people feel, what story the artist is telling. So I decided to create the collection, and the earliest painting I had was 1872 of Mihály Munkácsy, and then moving forward to the present day. So I have a lot of it here in my house, and then I have some that I store because I don't have any more walls to do it. and I've really enjoyed it, though. I've enjoyed showing it to other art museums have called, and they want to bring their board. See, many people don't know about their art and don't know about the timeliness in which they were painted. And artists don't lie. They paint what they feel. So you can know which decade, what was going on, whether it was depressing and powerful and full of, and then getting into the modern ages, and then when the communist regime took over, they really didn't allow contemporary art to be shown. So I began then by finding pictures that were some of the first early pictures that were shown in the country at a certain time, and they kind of opened the door and then they shut it. So it took many years for their contemporary artists to actually be accepted in the galleries and shown in public and then collected. So I've exhibited the collection about 15 or 16 times, largely to universities or to museums where they want their patrons and, donors and people who come to study there to know about this genre of painting and the artists and what work they created.
I love that, and I can't wait to see some of the beautiful paintings. So I'm curious, because part of the culture, of course, is art, and I love how it's paired with food.
Yes.
Did you have any memorable moments and meals?
Yeah, and gained about 5 or 10 pounds as a result. But they have wonderful food. And I loved immediately all the goulash and all the, they had veal is very, how do I say it, plentiful there, for example, and meats. They eat a lot of things, and but they're also an agrarian culture, so there were a lot of wonderful vegetables, and they have a big food hall that I loved going to and just seeing what was coming, and they were beautiful. They had the right climate. They're very close. Hungary is very close to Italy, actually.
Yes.
So some of these things kind of step over the border, and some don't. And their cuisine is really unusual, and you kind of have to get used to it. There's lots of different things you're eating, and you don't know exactly what you're eating, but it's very good. So I had to learn their goulash and all of their sauces. And their desserts are kind of wonderful. They're very sweet, but yet very good. And it was the way they relished the food. Yeah. They didn't appreciate food badly served, or the people who lived well enough. They appreciate it, and they have this great agrarian culture. So they grow the most wonderful vegetables, and. I suppose in those days when I was there, if they really wanted something, they had to drive probably to Vienna to get it, which is 2 hours away by car, but it was doable. And then I think now it's just full of restaurants. I haven't been back in at least 5 years, and I need to go back. I keep planning trips, and then, they get dissembled for some reason or another, but I really did enjoy that part. And I have several friends still from there who I communicate with, and am very happy that I get to. And it's a very important role being ambassador in these smaller countries, because you have more opportunity to reach more people. Yes. And I didn't spend all of my time in Budapest by any means. I like to go out to the lake region. I like to go north to the country, and Slovakia is an hour and a half away. Amazing. And drive over there and the view, the sights, and the wonderful statues in the Hero Square, and all these things, and then learning about World War II and how that was, and the memorials that had been built, and the history, and their communist history, all of that. They'd been taken over by so many dictators for so long. So having freedom became something very new to them when I was there.
Wow, what an incredible experience. And thank you for representing the United States so beautifully, so well. And as a woman ambassador, I love that.
Well, I did really spend a lot of time on healthcare and women's health. And I toured a lot of the hospitals from top to bottom of the country. And when I got there, breast cancer was one of the leading causes of death with women. When I left, it kept dwindling down. So eventually it has become probably the third cause of death of women. But at least women are talking about it. Yes. And we did we created a big walk there with music, and there were their Minister of Health and others would walk in it, and soon several hundred people, we would walk across the chain bridge, the Savor, which is right in the middle of the river, And it was just wonderful. On a night in October, I can remember that we walked with candles, women who'd never been able to say the word breast cancer. I have breast cancer. So it was really the time when that awakening came, and I was very happy about it because at least they knew now, and they knew what it was, and they knew that they needed care.
Yes,
so,
when you speak it aloud, it does not become scary.
That's right.
And knowing that there are resources, thank you for your courage
Well,
and leadership and
well,
that as well. Well, I always love to explore new restaurants, and you're very often in New York and Palm Beach. Any favorite must-dine places?
Well, I think my favorite restaurant still is La Bernardin. I think it is such an amazing, and that chef, and the length of time that's gone on is stunning.
Yes.
And it's a real treat to have a meal there, for sure. I also like some of the, I've always liked New York pizza. I've always liked the sort of snack food in New York is very good. But there's so many good restaurants now, and so many interesting chefs. It's hard to pin, which ones I like the most. There are some that I just think are amazing. There are incredible Italian restaurants. That's the nice thing. Of every nationality, there is a restaurant group around it. That's true. And so I try as many different as I can. But I think the fact that they have beautiful green markets, and they have fresh fish, the Fulton Avenue Fish Market, and all that contributes to how good their restaurants are.
Absolutely.
So they have wonderful product and great nationalities living there. I'll be happy when I hope New York kind of brings itself back to how it was some years ago. And it would be wonderful if they could.
Indeed, indeed. And Palm Beach, any must-dine places that are your favorite here?
I love a favorite. It's a private club, but I love Club Colette because I love it when there's atmosphere with the food that's so wonderful. And the fella Dan Ponton, who owns it, is a great friend of mine, and many other restaurants. Bill Bouquet came here and introduced the whole town to Cajun chicken. And there's so many more new restaurants that had not been here before. Sometimes they come and go, but like La Galou and French restaurant, well known, La Serena, which is a wonderful restaurant that has a beautiful wine list, and I could go on for days, believe me. But the food here has gotten very good, and the food, the food stuffs, the ability to find good food. And for a long time, Florida was an advanced golf course. It was not a business community. And it was, you could find, Florida shrimp and shellfish and whatever, but the rest of it wasn't there. So it wasn't here, but it's growing now into that, and I think it's exciting. And in Miami, which has just exploded, and with all the wonderful Cuban food, and many of the New York restaurants have gone there.
So many great places. I'm going to be trying Cafe Baloo tomorrow.
Oh, great.
So I'm excited about that.
Well, I think you'll love that. That is wonderful. And it's a wonderful restaurant, and that chef is wonderful, too.
Oh, this will be great.
Yeah,
well,
you'll enjoy it.
This time together has been so special, Nancy.
Thank you. Well, to me too, and thank you very much.
Thank
you. I'm so happy to know you've gotten through some of your issues, and we'll all pray that you do.
Absolutely.
And just know that anytime you'd like to come down and have a tour through our Promise Fund, what did happen, I think I told you the 3 replications are coming. So our organization and our system will look quite different, we hope, at this time next year. So I'd love to show them to you, and hopeful that every community can do something like this. It's totally possible.
Well, you have set the template for change. You are a game changer in all shapes. influence for
Thank
this.
you.
So
Thank you.
Thank
you so much.
so much, Nancy. And thank you, dear foodie friends, for having a heart for charity. And I encourage you to have the conversations around your kitchen table to encourage each other along the way and look at some great charities. I'll make sure we have a link to the Promise Fund. And always remember to take a moment and savor the day.